This episode of Talk Raytown is brought to you by Chris and Vicky Turnbow.
Thank you, Jeff, for that introduction. Chris was not able to join me today, but we both are excited to sponsor the August podcast. After talking with Jeff, it was decided we would tape my message from Raytown High School after attending this year's convocation. Each year, the energy, the enthusiasm, and the dedication that seems to come out of the event is very heartwarming. Chris and I want to wish Dr. Penelope Martin-Knox, the rest of the administrative team, staff, teachers, students, and parents a great 24-25 school year.
I don't know why I keep talking without recording. All right. This is great. This is going to be so much fun. All right. Welcome back to Talk Raytown. I'm Zach Sweets, your official host. Every time I come in, I wonder if I'm still the host, but they hand me the microphone. And I know you're back because you listened to the last episode, and I think every episode gets even better. We have more and more folks that are listening and watching, and so we invited none other than the superintendent of the Raytown Quality Schools, Dr. Penelope Martin-Knox. Welcome to Talk Raytown. I know you're an avid listener.
Absolutely, I am. Anything to support our community, I'm in.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I was curious. I mean, you got a prefix, you got a hyphen, and so I asked the question, how do you want me to refer to you? And the answer was really unique. It wasn't it's doctor. What you said, however, whatever is natural. But I'm curious, how do students refer to you? Do they say, "Hey, superintendent, doctor"? Are they super formal?
So I have multiple ways in which I interact with students when they greet me. There are a couple of schools when I walk into the building, they'll say, "Dr. Superintendent is here," or "The superintendent is here." "Hi, superintendent." One of the schools actually sees me, and most of the students will see me and say, "Hey, girl, hey." And I reply back, "Hey, girls, hey." Or I'll get, "Hey, Dr. PMK." And so I answer and respond to them all.
That's awesome. I have teenage nieces and nephews, and I have no nicknames. So you are well ahead of me on connecting. But more so than that, really, I was struck by something as we were setting up the meeting or the interview here. And you mentioned it's also a hashtag for the kids, all for the kids. And just in our brief conversation and what I've seen already, that's more than a mantra. So we're talking about education. We're talking about Raytown Quality Schools. But before we get to Raytown, I do want to know, where does that all for the kids kind of come from? What in your kind of life story brought you to be so dedicated to education and to have that not only as a mantra, but something that seems to be picking up around the school district, and something that is a constant reminder of why you all show up every day?
Well, I think I've been fortunate in my journey. Starting as early as third grade, I can remember almost every one of my elementary school teachers. And in third grade, there was a conversation with my teachers and my grandmother for multiple reasons, but one was about my placement in school. And I believe that with these teachers really investing in me and my classmates, going along this journey, I wanted to give back to children what was given to me. I believe I've had teachers who invested in me, who supported me, who cared for me, who pushed me, and to make me move forward without settling for anything less. And so all for kids, or for the children, is truly about that. As a leader, I began using that in my closing signature when I was a principal, because everything that we talk about is for the kids. Not only just saying it, but living it on a day-to-day basis, making sure kids understand that it's for you, our parents understand that it's for the children, and every decision that is made, it's about what's best for children. So to continue to serve as a reminder for me and for others that it's always for the children. Or on social media, as I put, hashtag all for kids, because that's why we do what we do.
And when thinking about kids, kids are a little rambunctious sometimes, a little rowdy. One thing that you did edit out is what you said earlier. Why did Miss Lee come by? Why, other than academics? What was that about?
Sure. So Penelope had a rough week that week. Penelope was very talkative, and I actually left, I'm going to date myself, but I left my Raggedy Ann doll in school. And I believe Miss Linda Lee to be specific, brought the doll to the home and spoke with my grandmother. And she said, we need to do something different for her because she won't stop talking. And so my grandmother said, sure, we can do whatever. But she looked at me, she said, you will stop talking. Point well received. But Miss Lee recognized that that a part of the talkativeness was because of the lack of challenge in terms of my placement. And so at that time, my grandmother trusted in my teachers, of course, and they placed me in classes that were classified as high intensity. I think it solved the problem just a little bit. But that's as far as it went. But she didn't come back to the home anymore. But she came to the house. No, absolutely not. Not with Dorothy Martin. So the chit chat stopped a little bit because I was a little more engaged and a little more challenged. And so that's why I can't believe you put me on the spot. But yes, that's why she came to the home, because Penelope would not stop talking. And there was another incident where I put my denim jacket on backwards, and it was in the middle of standardized testing, and everyone else was still testing, and I was done. And so I put my jacket on backwards, and I had Kenny button my jacket up. And when the class was over, she looked at them and, I dare you to take that jacket off. And so she brought that up to my grandmother too. My grandmother, they made me go home with that jacket on backwards that day. So yeah, we live and we learn.
Yeah, your jacket's on correctly.
It is.
You know, you didn't make a choice. But yeah, so speaking of kind of being dressed up today, school's back. We're back at it. You've been around to some of the schools. I know there's probably a lot of excitement by the students to see some friends, and I'm sure the faculty is ready to get back to another year of inspiring kids, and maybe parents are ready to send their kids back after a summer, maybe a little bit. I'm curious, what does the prep work to getting to this week and being ready for another school year? Of course, there's some time to breathe and exhale. We got another one. Everybody enjoy some vacation or just some time away. We're coming back for another round. What is that prep? When does that start? Does that start just during the summer, or maybe even is it year round?
So I'm glad you said there should be time to breathe, because when you find it, let me know, because I've not seen it. And I actually just said to the team the other day, I think we are the only profession that ends a year, begins a year, and plans a year. So the planning for next year has already taken place. The planning for this year began last year. And so throughout the year, we're making adjustments, but it is an ongoing process, because what we need to do is to take the information that we've learned from last year to make adjustments for the upcoming year. And then sometimes we have to make adjustments in the midst of the work to make sure that we're going in the right direction. So there's really no planning cycle, if you will. That's the beginning and the end, because it's ongoing. But again, I just said to the team the other day, I think we're the only profession that is concluding a year, beginning a year, and planning for the next year, all in one. And so again, it's looking at it from a macro perspective, and it's almost like looking at it as a labyrinth. It's a big puzzle, and making sure all the pieces fit, whether it's hiring, whether it's the curriculum, whether it's the financial aspect of it. We're always looking at ways in which we can improve instruction for children, because that's what it's all about, and the operational aspect. So it's an ongoing process for the beginning, middle, and the end of the school year. And you can, again, have 3 simultaneous conversations going on to conclude the year, to plan the year, and to plan forward for the next year, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
But it is definitely an intricate work. And so usually there is no breather, but I am ensuring that I support my team, because many of them have families, and I have to make them sometimes take a stance and to take a step back and to breathe and to enjoy family, because family is important.
If you find an hour, or maybe if you found a day, heavens forbid you found a week, what do you do when you have a little bit of time to breathe and maybe enjoy family? How do you like to ground yourself before getting right back into the work?
I'm always going to be honest. Shop. I love to shop, whether I'm purchasing something or just decompressing, if you will. I love to shop, but there are a lot of things I do. As I'm a musician, and I don't think we've had that conversation. I was a band teacher for years, and I was a music major.
We're going off script now. Let's go. I love it.
You like? Okay, you can bring me back now. I follow directions.
I'm saying we're going down this. I didn't know what. So you were a band director.
I was.
What instrument or instruments do you play?
So I play all of them because a part of the requirements to get a degree in music, you have to play all the instruments. But my primary instrument is clarinet, and my secondary instrument is saxophone. So as a music major, I had to play in all the ensembles. So I played classical clarinet, and then I learned jazz through playing tenor saxophone in school. And so I oftentimes will pull out my clarinet. It's a couple of months ago, I did a recording and posted it just to get a reaction out of folks, and it was mixed. It was like, you still have it. And then, of course, those who went to college with me was like, do you need your inhaler? Do you need some? Yeah. And I was the only female music major, so I get it from all directions, but I can take it. So I'm also a musician, so I will find time to practice and pull my instrument out. But I also like to exercise, so I'll find myself at the wellness center or just walking the trail or using the equipment in the home. But I always have to find time to just decompress.
Yeah, music's such a great way to decompress as well. Listening, playing. I'll give the producer a break for not letting us know that we had a musician, because I might have asked that you brought the clarinet.
And I would have.
Oh Lord, we're gonna have to have you back. That's all I heard. We're gonna do this again.
And I
so
can do that.
A performance.
Absolutely.
What do you take from that? Just having that music background. Right, so there are studies that just talk about how the brain is engaged differently when you're doing different tasks, and in particular music. What is that kind of engagement with music for yourself? How does that kind of engage your brain when coming to this work and thinking about all that that your work does for the kids and that the school district does for the kids? I imagine there's got to be a level of creativity that inspires.
It does. There's some other factors as well. We just did a book study a couple of months ago, and it's really about leading the work. And my secretary leaned over to me and she said, you need to focus on number 3. And I said, what's number 3? And I looked, and it was focus, focus, focus. And so I said, explain. I knew exactly where she was going. Sometimes the brain, as a musician, because you're doing so many things at one time and it's trained, as a conductor, you're looking at a score that's going this way, that's going vertical, horizontal, that's going left to right. You have multiple instruments that are in front of you. You have orchestration that's in front of you. You have a baton. And so my brain does not allow me to focus on one thing. I can do multiple things at one time. And I think I do them well. I had to read a book not too long ago called Focus on the One Thing, so that the one thing is one thing. And in that research, it says that you really aren't multitasking, but I would counter that. I can actually multitask. So it allows me to dig deep. I think what happens as a musician, because there's always passion that goes into what you're doing. So I lead with passion. I lead with focus. I lead with that empathetic aspect to make sure that I'm doing my absolute best so that the interpretation is there. So as a musician, you're transforming those notes on the page to get people to understand what you're saying through the musicality. And so as a leader, there is creativity, and communications department will tell you that when she's coming, shut the door, because when I'm by myself, that's something else. I just continue to think about different and creative ways to get the work done when we identify where the needs are. And I see a nod over here like, yeah, she does. And so we're always trying to be creative in what we do. I think creativity breeds excitement. Creativity breeds innovation. And we never want to be stuck in one place. We always want to advance and not be followers, but to be in front of it, to be cutting edge. So I think that as a musician, it has allowed me to be able to think that way.
I think that's wonderful, because being a leader of any organization, large, small, middle, there has to be that understanding of what is the main thing. And you have already established for us and for everyone in the school district, all for the kids, all for the children. So keeping that main thing while able to do all the juggling. I called it juggling chainsaws. You don't want to let one slip, but so you got to make sure that you know what you're doing and how to do it better. How do you then hope to inspire the folks that you work with? One thing that you said when we were talking was that you like to focus on the people that you're leading, so that they can go be the best faculty members directly engaging with the students that they can be. What does that what does that mission look like for you, and how do you achieve that?
I think it's valuing everyone who's at the table. I oftentimes tell my team, if I'm the smartest person in the room, there's a problem. And so you were hired to be a part of this work. So it's sitting down and having conversations, coming up with ideas and concepts and a collaborative approach, and taking everyone's opinion and putting it on the table and their expertise. And oftentimes some of the projects that we engage in is not just a project from Dr. Martin-Knox, but it's actually from someone on the team. And so it's valuing them for what it is that they bring to the table, and looking at it from a collective standpoint to formulate a plan, to gauge what the end goal should be and how we're going to get there. It's focusing on the what, why, and the how, and really just immersing ourselves in the work and valuing everybody for their expertise, for their understanding, and never shutting anyone down. Sometimes there are thoughts and plans that could just be so outlandish, you may say, really, we can't do that, but we're never going to say can't. Tell me more about it. And so it's really digging deep into it, but it's really showing everyone that you are a valued part of this team. You're an integral part of the success of this district, and we can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. While super is in the title superintendent, that doesn't mean I have a cape. Well, I do have a cape, but it doesn't mean I can do it by myself. And I will tell anyone, whether it's the voices of the executive leadership team, whether it's the voices of principals, whether it's the voices of the food service staff, the custodians, the children, our parents, our community, everyone's voice is important in this work. I believe that our children are our customers, and we have to meet their needs and satisfy them and satisfy their needs. If not, they're not going to come back. And so we can't keep doing, when you hear someone sometimes say, I've been doing this for 10 years. Well, I'm not going to be too sarcastic, but I'll say I don't have shoes that are 10 years old. So if we're still doing something that we've done 10 years old, look at our clientele. Is it appealing to them? And the same applies for the adults as well. So how creative are we in terms of leading this work, but getting everybody to buy into the concepts and the ideas that are moving forward? And I will take it right back to my closing in my letters. It's all for children. It's for the children. How does this benefit our children? And so we always go back to that as our primary focus.
What I'm hearing from you is just laser focused intentionality. It sounds like just the intentionality behind how not just you are showing up, but how you want the adults to show up for these children. That is not, if anybody was ever in question, they probably weren't listening. And I certainly hear that now. And focusing on the children, so a company might do a quality survey, might do do our survey and we'll give you $5 off. How do you connect with the students so that you personally, it's hard to get a message on a game of telephone from students to on up to the superintendent. Do you cut through that and try to connect with them one-on-one or directly?
Absolutely. Actually, monthly, I eat lunch with students. I bring them over to the district office, and they sit at the table with me in a round table. And it's also my opportunity to eat snacks because I bring snacks in as well. But we sit down and we have authentic conversations about what's happening in their space, what's happening in your place. We've actually gotten to the point where children will invite me into the building and say, let's walk, because I've put that on the table as an option. And so I can't tell you the number of times I've been in the building where they're like, well, can we look at the lighting? Can we look at the structures in the hallways?
Students are asking you these questions.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I would have never, as a student, thought about stuff like that.
And so when I get the information back from students, I take it back to the team and say, hey, what kind of lighting do we have in the hallways? And, it was at really one of the high schools, and they were like, the lighting doesn't help us. And when we're walking through the hallways, and I think sometimes it's a distraction, and it hurts my head. Those factors are taken into consideration. I also have been doing something since I've been here at Raytown, and I have town hall meetings where the principals select students of a diverse nature in their buildings, and I tell them, don't send me all the advanced students that have all straight A's. I want a mixed bag, not just by gender, race, all those other factors that we oftentimes look at as educators, but I want you to send me diverse students so we can really get feedback from our children. And so there are times where I may have about 200 to 300 children in a room just to have conversations with them, and I throw the questions out, and they know that it is open floor. And so I'll just give you one of the primary things that was spoken about when I first arrived, and the kids talked about the food. They talked about the food in the cafeteria. It's not new. I've heard it when I was a teacher. It was talked about. When I was a principal, it was talked about. And as a superintendent, it was talked about. And the first thing the kids said is, can we get diversity in the juices? Can we, why do we have to have double servings of beans? And I'm just being authentic with some of the things and recalling what the conversations were. But what it came down to is they wanted healthier meals. And so I'm proud to say that beginning in the middle of last year, we began to open salad bars in our schools. And so oftentimes people say, well, how do you know what kids are telling you the truth? Well, first of all, I have to take them at their word. And kids are probably the most honest little people there are. And
almost too honest.
Yes, sometimes they are. And so when I visit cafeterias, when I'm in the schools, because I'm in schools quite frequently, I noticed that there was a lot of discarded lunch food. I needed to shift that, because if children aren't eating, then they're not learning. And so I said, what do we need to do? Well, I know that they wanted different choices for juices, and they weren't asking for much, but they continued to talk about salads. Why don't we have salads? And so I took a picture today of the salad bar at one of the middle schools. I was like, oh my goodness. And there's nothing more than seeing your thoughts come to reality. And the team worked really hard to get it done. And what we wind up doing is going to other school districts. I call the superintendents, and I don't mind asking for help. Can we come and visit your cafeteria? And they're like, my cafeteria? I do. I want to see how it's operating, how you're serving food, what the menu looks like, how do you get to that place? And so myself and the team went to multiple school districts to walk through the cafeteria. And I'm very competitive. And I looked at my team. I said, there's no way that this school district should have this and our kids not have it. Let's make it happen, because it's all for kids. And it has happened. And so now the next concern was, can we get more ranch? Because it's not enough. And so so we're working on that.
One.
But it's really just staying in touch with the students and having those conversations, whether it's my monthly meetings with what I call the superintendent's cabinet, whether it's having our town hall meetings, or just my visits in the school. I will sit down at the desk or at the table or on the floor with children to say, tell me what you're doing today. How are things going? And they will tell me, because I often tell them, who do you think my boss is? And some will say I don't have a boss. Some will say it's the Board of Education. I'm like, kind of, sort of, for both. But really, you all are my bosses. All 8,000 of you, you're my bosses, because I work for you. And it's about customer satisfaction.
Yeah, I count myself lucky. I think I had a pretty good superintendent when I was going through school. I went all through the same school district, and at least was fortunate enough to know him. And the reason why I say fortunate enough to know him is at my point in time going through school, students didn't know who the superintendent was. And it wasn't necessarily anything about him, but that was kind of the norm, that distance. It sounds like there is, again, I'm going to go back to an intentional approach to connecting with the students. Since you've been here, do you see students kind of come up to you when in the building, or do they still kind of like, oh, that's the superintendent?
I will give an example. I went to get something to eat. It was one of the restaurants in the area, and when I walked in the door, she was third grade. I believe she was third grade at the time, and there was a younger sibling, and they were eating dinner with their father. And I heard, that's the superintendent. And she said, I'm going to go hug her. And he was like, no, you can't. While I was at the counter, and I could hear this discussion 2-3 tables. When I went to go out the door to turn, she was right there embracing me in a hug. And he said, I'm sorry. There's no need for you to apologize. It made me feel good to, one, you know who I was, and you know that I'm in this with you. And yes, you can have a hug. So yes, students do approach me. They approach me in Walmart. They approach me wherever I am. I actually went to Ollie's, and where's that Ollie's in Lenexa? And it was a Saturday. And I wasn't expecting to see anyone. I was not dressed in a suit. And I heard, Dr. Martin-Knox. And I'm like, oh, my goodness, kids see me in a T-shirt and sneakers and shorts. Hi. But it just, again, fills that bucket. But there are some other things. Kids will send me emails. They will send me letters.
And you read that. I mean,
I do.
You take that input.
I do. They send me letters. I had a young lady who sent me a letter towards the end of the year. She wasn't having a good year. And she sent the letter saying, let's make a deal. If you allow me to come back to school, I will do my very best. And if I don't, you can send me back. Well, I don't know if that's a really good deal, but it just, again, gave me comfort in knowing that a child was comfortable enough to send me a letter for me to be able to read. And I respond. Not only do I respond, but I will go to the school to have that face-to-face and tell me what it is that you need. And then mentoring. I saw a young lady today who had been at RSA, who's our alternative school. That's our alternative school for a while. And I saw her in the hall today, and I just smiled. And the principal's new in the building, and I said, let me know what she needs. And she said, who is she? And I said her name, and she came down the hall, and she gave me a little twiddle of the fingers, and then I nodded, and she came over and gave me a hug, because that was that confirmation. Come on, it's not any different than what it was when you were at RSA. And so just having those connections with children, just again, I believe that you can't lead the work if you don't know what the work looks like. And so I, as the superintendent, find myself in schools, in classrooms, in the cafeteria, talking to my building service staff, talking to my food service staff, just talking to everyone who's in the building, because they're valued. And again, not one person can do this work. And I think I said this, but if I'm the smartest person in the room, there's a problem. I value what it is that you're bringing to the table and your input.
Just continue to learn more about you. I didn't know you also moonlit as Wayne Brady in Let's Make a Deal. But I love the approach to like just break down whatever the institution is in the separation between who you're serving and how you're serving. And it's a lesson in leadership. It truly is. To kind of pivot, so we talked about the teachers and the faculty. We talked about the students. I imagine being a parent is a little challenging. No, don't go give her a hug. There she goes. But how do you also build that trust? You kind of hinted at it with that story. How do you build that trust with parents? Of course, they see for the children. They see all for the kids. But what does that actually mean on a level if I have a child in your school district?
Yeah, so I think it's the presence in the community. Presence in the community, the celebratory opportunities, whether it's an end of the year performance, whether it's going to athletic events, I'm present. I'm wearing my gear to represent that particular school. I have a lot of gear for our schools and to support. But I think it's just the presence being there and just introducing myself to parents and having those conversations. It's a matter of fact, yesterday we had a lot of our back to school events, and one of the parents walked over to me. She said, I'm sorry to bother you, but I've never seen you in person, but I've seen your picture. And I extended my hand and I said, I'm Penelope. Because I am. At that moment, it's a parent who is trying to make that connection. But it is truly about making connections with our families. That's how you also build that trust. Because I am not like the Wiz in The Wizard of Oz, behind a shield. I am out and about and present in the community, present at events. And a lot of times the children are my advocates because I have those relationships with the children. And parents will tell me, they told me they had lunch with you, or they told me you stopped in the classroom. But it's really also about listening. Oftentimes parents want to do the very best for their children. And sometimes it's just about listening. And so I'm present there to listen in that face-to-face capacity. Sometimes we'll have some people who will go to social media and will post comments. And so I have staff who look at the comments, but I also have community members who will send me a screenshot because oftentimes I don't read that information. I will call. We will go back and look up the name and see the phone number, and I'll say, I see that you have some concerns. How can we help? And just making that connection to say, I hear you and I see you.
And that's not a tone of, hey, you left a bad review.
No.
How have those, even for somebody that might have a really strongly held opinion, how is it working with parents that are really, because you're right, it's all for the kids. Everyone has the same focus. How do you bring it back to that and get to a place where you can build that connection, even if we might not agree? But you know what? She's about my kid, so we're gonna move forward and find a way to do that. How do you work those difficult conversations with parents? I mean, it's a very personal thing, their child.
And I think it happens more than not because I am a mother. And so knowing that my child, I raised him to be a certain way, and sometimes he's not always what I expect him to be, but he's a child first. And I think sometimes we have to realize they're children. But when we have those spaces where we can agree to disagree, I think that's the end goal. We can agree to disagree. But at the end of the day, the decision is going to be made to meet the needs of all children. And so thank you for bringing those ideas and concepts to us. And I'm not going to hold it against anyone because they have their view of what is happening in our district, because I do know we're not going to please everyone, but understand every day, we're out here to do our very best for children, and that is the bottom line. And so I can express, what our expectations are, to be consistent when we're expressing our expectations and following through. But I think that's the other piece as well, giving them the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation and listen. Let me hear what it is that you have to say without judging you, without interrupting you, and without trying to force you to understand where we're going, because sometimes they're just not going to understand. But know that when the decisions are made, it's about children doing what's best for children. It's authentic. And so, again, we will respect one another and continue to move forward. And a lot of times they come around, right? Or I come around. All right. Like there's sometimes I'm like, yeah, maybe we do have to shift the way in which we're doing things. I'll just give an example. Over summer school, we had some concerns with the traffic. And most people will say, why did you email the superintendent about traffic? Because it was the school that was creating the traffic log, right? And so someone sent the screenshot, and the first thing I did is I contacted my transportation staff. I contacted my operations staff to say, let's go look at this traffic. Let's look at the traffic pattern. Why is...
You went out there as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm hearing you say this throughout our conversation. So I went with them, and so you are going with your staff. You're not a superintendent that sends a memo and go handle this. You're out on the streets with them.
I'm in the trenches, if you will, because I believe, again, you can see things and interpret what is written, but in order to understand what's happening, go see it for yourself. And I do that quite frequently. Day before yesterday, I looked out my window at my office and I saw a Dorito bag blowing around. And so I told my admin, I said, I need to go get that stuff. It's a lot of trash outside. And she was like, well, just call staff. Well, they're down at the other building. Just find me some gloves. She said, really? Yes, go get me some gloves. So I put on the little smelly little blue gloves and I went out and I began to pick up the items that were outside. And so maybe 15 minutes later, I realized I had a missed call. Well, my chief of operations called and said, why did you have on blue gloves? And I said, there were things that need to be done. He said, I saw the blue gloves and I don't believe that was something that a superintendent should be doing. Well, what is it that a superintendent is supposed to do? It needed to be done. I went and I did it, and we're all good. He said, I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. That's fine. And if it does, I'll go get another set of blue gloves and go out there and retrieve those items and discard them myself. But when I know that my staff is somewhere else, I'm going to again. It's boots on the ground, rolling up your sleeves and getting it done. Or even when I've gone to schools, I'll see the principals running around the cafeteria and I'll see staff and there's a spill right there in front of me. I've been known to pick up a mop to mop up the milk without having someone slip and fall in it or waiting for somebody to come get it. You do it yourself. I know how to use a mop.
And that's the sort of mentality that I think for anybody on the outside looking in, and that can include a parent, can build trust that somebody's there for the right reasons. And that's, again, all for the kids. And I think perhaps I don't think I'm going out on a limb here. The community is really supporting what your staff is doing, what the school district is doing, and providing that support for the school district and what they can do. We're seeing an opportunity for students now with new facilities, and so kind of just, if you will, your love letter to the community. What has the community meant to the school district, to your all's work to get here? I know that we talked about academics and students can't be as successful as they possibly can be if they don't have the whole support all the way around them. And I think, at least from the outside looking in, I think community is a big part of that. That makes that possible. What does community mean to you all?
I believe a community is only as strong as its schools, and its schools are only as strong as its community and the support. And when we look at many of the individuals in our community, they don't have children that's in school. So it's continuing to remind them, you had a child who came through this district or another one, or you yourself came through this district. And so we're truly trying to make this place a space of excellence, if you will. We're already a great community. I am grateful to the community for voting for the bond for us to be able to do this work. I don't think there was anyone that I spoke to that said, what else can I do to help our children? And so when we're advancing our facilities, it's truly about giving our children a place and space that they feel valued, because when we have buildings that are coming apart, not by anyone's fault, but because of the aging process, and we have to stay connected with the times. There were a few who said, why do we need a new building? we need a new building because in some cases it was unsafe. So we had to advance the way in which we are delivering instruction, and it begins with the infrastructure. The Performing Arts Center, we have some talented individuals in our district. I mean, very talented, whether it's the production, whether it's the choir, the band, the athletics, we have talented children. Why not allow them that space and that facility to be able to further enhance what it is that they deliver and they bring forward? And so I'm excited for the work that's going to happen at South High School. We walked through not too long ago just to see it come to life. It just makes me smile from ear to ear. And not just because I have an arts background, but it's because the kids deserve it. And when we're asking our children to go out into this world to compete with others, they need to have exactly what others have and more to be able to do that, to be able to produce at the levels in which they can. And they cannot do so if they're not supported in a space that allows them to do that. With the technology that we'll have in the Performing Arts Center at South High School, the versatility that will exist in the facility at South High School, being able to convert it to a learning space, but also a place for performances where the community can come in, I can see us being able to host conventions and to host other school districts here in our very own community, which will shed light because we are a diamond in the rough. And so we're going to do everything we possibly can do to tout we are Raytown. And I also use that hashtag a lot. We are. Our community has been very, very supportive, and I'm grateful for that because, again, they voted for the bond. They understood what the mission was. And to be quite fair and honest, the work began prior to my coming. So I have to give compliments to the previous administration in recognizing that we have to make a shift in the way in which we're doing things. So I'm grateful for their vision, but I'm also grateful that I'm able to continue that legacy and that work that's taking place. That's not just for our children, but it's for our community as a whole.
What I was thinking of when you were talking is something that I know on social media you were ecstatic for. You're talking about handing off the baton, receiving the baton, and carrying it forward. But this person needed to know baton, the American track gold medalist from the 2024 Olympics who graduated from the Raytown South High School, none other than Quincy Hall himself, won gold in the 400 men's in Paris. What does that mean for students? You were talking about your students, they should have everything and more so that they can be competitive. I mean, that is the highest level of, at least for an athlete, competition. What did that mean, not just for you to see that, but what do you think that means for the students whenever they saw that? And I'm sure you're going to talk about that all year.
Absolutely. First of all, we're just proud of Quincy and his work. I was not here at the time, but there are teachers and administrators who are still in the district who actually taught him. And so when I look at the race, I think just the race itself, you saw determination, you saw perseverance, you saw determination, you saw drive, you saw strength, you saw all of those ideas and concepts that go into teaching children that you can do it. I think within that quick clip, it demonstrates all. And I said to teachers, and I will say to administrators, you never know where your influence will end when you're planting seeds in children. And if you listen to the clip that he said, you don't know what I've been through, the challenges that I've been through. Life is not easy. Life sometimes doesn't feel like it's lifing for others. But what that clip does say, and yes, we will continue to talk about it, is never give up. I don't care what it looks like. The end is only there when you say it's there. And he did not stop. Whether it's from the beginning, who knew he was going to make a comeback like that? And so that the message that it sends to children is, I don't care how far behind you think you are, never stop. The only way you lose is if you stop. Never stop. You'll get there. You will continue to get there. And it's the same thing I say to teachers. You never know where your influence will lead a child. And when he fell on the ground and built his imaginary snow angel, all I saw was the angel. That's all I saw was the angel. From the time you enrolled in school until the time you completed that race, You are an absolute angel, because the message you've sent to children is never stop and never give up. But it also sent a message to his family and to his teachers to say thank you. You invested in me correctly, and now let me show you. Almost like my story. No, I haven't won a gold medal. The closest I'll get to one is touching the screen where he held it up. But it's giving back to those who've poured into you. And the look of determination when he knew, I could possibly lose this, but I'm not going to stop. Whether I end in first, second, or third, I'm going to end at that finish line, and nothing's stopping me now.
That's incredible. That's really moving. And if I wanted to come hear more about the school, hear more about that, really taking that energy, that inspiration, and pouring into the students. I know there is the state of the schools that's coming up. What can the community expect to hear from you about kind of that direction, and how? I mean, it sounds like, and we all know this inspiring story started years ago. It's not just Quincy's story. It's 1,000% Quincy's story, but it's the community's story of investing in the children and what is possible for the children. When I come to the state of the schools, what should I expect to hear about from you?
So we always look at data, and we look at the trends of the data. And I always tell staff that we're going to look at a 5-year trend, because research says in order for change to occur, usually within a school, it takes about 5 years. And so we'll talk about our trend data so we can see what our school district looks like, because there's a constant shift. It's a constant shift in our demographics. It's a constant shift in the enrollment numbers. It's a constant shift with our staff. And so just making sure that everyone understands what we look like. Who is Raytown? What does Raytown Quality School District look like? So looking at the data first and foremost, but then talking about the trajectories. Where do we see ourselves 5 years down the road, and where our specific focuses or foci say. And so we have goals. We have board and district goals. We actually made that shift last year because there was a superintendent goals, there was board goals, there were district goals. You have so many goals that we can't focus just primarily on what's going to yield results for children. And so talking about our goals and where we're going, but also the expectations from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, because we have those expectations we have to meet as well. And so just really talking about the work that's taking place here in Raytown, from the academic structure, from the behavioral aspect, from attendance, because that's another big factor, but also our levels of poverty that exists within our community. So really giving a big picture of what we look like and how we'll address those diverse needs of every child that comes into our school district. It's really about an all hands on deck. And so it's not just to tell the story, just to tell the story. It's to tell the story so we can come together as one. We can come together as a collaborative unit to support and uphold our students who are in our schools, who are a part of the community. And we, again, as one collective body, are Raytown.
That just is reminiscent of something that I heard growing up. It takes a village, and that's really what it sounds like. The work that you bring every day, the work that everybody that supports the children and the students, the community that comes around it. It's the village. Like you said, we're Raytown. We're here, and so I really appreciate the time to get to know you more. And I know this wasn't just for me, but I know that folks that will listen will certainly at least hear one or two tidbits they didn't know about you before, and if anything, make them unafraid to approach you if they were before, and that's really what I was hoping to have this conversation. And we can talk about metrics with students every day, and I know that's something that is at the front of mind, and I'm not saying that's not important, but it is important to know who's leading these organizations that are going to have such a large impact on our community and our young folks. So I'm leaving today knowing that that these young folks are in good hands. Not that was ever in question, but I hope that that folks share this episode so that they can really understand that, hey, you can also talk to Dr. Penelope Martin-Knox, or Dr. PMK, as the students call you. So I can't thank you enough And thank you all for listening to Talk Raytown. This is, such an important conversation because, like you said, there is no community without a school district, and a school district cannot exist without their community. So that's really what the Raytown Chamber is trying to invest in and make sure that there are elements of this community that are necessary so that everyone can have an opportunity to be successful. And it does oftentimes start with the kids. So thank you so much. And thank you for listening to Talk Raytown. I'm Zach Sweets with Dr. Penelope Martin-Knox, Dr. M.P. Doggone it, I did it wrong. That was actually our second take. So we're going to leave this in. Don't you cut it. All right, we'll see you next time on Talk Raytown.